welcome to the channel. I'm Summer. Today's haircut tutorial, we are combining both round and square layers for today's haircut. This is going to be great for clients who like plenty of movement in the back of their haircut, but are maybe concerned with losing too much weight or thickness along their sides. This cut is going to be great for anyone who is looking for a change or maybe loves the look that both layers give, all while breaking down the importance of each so you can always be sure to feel your best self when it comes to your hair. Let's get started. Okay, so I already have her sectioned off. I'm not going to be cutting her perimeter. If by the end of putting our layers in we need to go in and snip some, we can, but for now I'm going to leave it. I've got a parting right along the ear, a little bit set back behind the ear on both sides, and like I said, we're going to be doing our round layers in the back, so we're going to get a lot more movement and shape, but with the square layers in the front we're going to maintain a little bit more weight and thickness. I thought about doing this cut the other day because I was like, you know, I like a lot of movement in the back of my haircut, but not so much in the front, so like, why not combine both? So I'm excited for you guys to see it, so we're just going to hop right in. Taking our section to start our round layers, I always start in the middle here. So I'm gonna take my guide. Actually, that's pretty too far over. We'll take our first middle section and just comb this hair out of the way. You can clip it if you wanted to. And then we're gonna be coming in, and I'm gonna start with the fine side of my comb to set my guide for my layers. I'm gonna keep them more like a medium length, enough where we get some movement, but where they're not like so ridiculously short, just to keep things different. And when we do round layers, we're coming out how you see me doing right now, and you're moving rounded with the head. Where when we do the square, if you aren't familiar, I've got a couple videos where I do comparison layers. Square comes all the way up. You bring everything straight up, but I am gonna be doing these a little bit at an angle to keep even more length and weight. So it will be a little different, which I like to keep things fun and fresh. So moving into our next section here, and you wanna make sure you're taking a small enough guide that you can see through, and then cut. And I'm doing a blunt cut. And I might come in and take this very top layer a little shorter after the fact, but I want to get the bulk of the layers created just to see kind of how it's laying first. So when I'm taking my next section, you'll take your previous guide that you already had. You can comb that out of the way and take in some hair from your new section, and you're rounding all the way. These are gonna be traveling layers. So what I like about the idea of this haircut is that you get to combine sort of the best of both worlds, because a lot of times people with like finer, thinner hair, it tends to be the most thin around their face and on the sides, but you'll have plenty of hair in the back. This is my problem. So I want a lot of layers sometimes throughout my back, but then when I take too many on my sides, I just don't really feel like myself. Like I feel like I want more hair here, but I need movement. So kind of combining both, it allows you to get the best of both worlds, but you get to maintain that like thickness and weight that you want in your front, whether you have like fine hair or thin hair. Because even people with the thickest head of hair might be like, don't take that much off. So I'm gonna come in here. This is the last section on this side, so I'm coming straight out from her head, and I'm letting that perimeter fall and cutting. Okay, so we've just got some nice movement on this first side of the layers that we've created. They're not too short, but we've removed a good amount of length here. So you're gonna have a lot more flow and movement in this back. And then before we actually finish the rest of these back layers, I wanna give a thank you to our sponsor for today's video, BetterHelp. Our hair really can affect the way we feel about ourselves. It can make us feel great, it can make us feel bad. In my 16 years as a stylist, I can't count how many times I had clients wanting to cut their hair on a whim because they were going through something. Having experience with therapy myself, I love the setup of BetterHelp. They make therapy more affordable and more accessible because it's all online. Finding a therapist can be stressful, and being limited to whoever is just in your area can be very hard. BetterHelp makes it easy by filling out a few questions that allow them to connect you with a therapist in just a few days. And if you don't like your initial therapist, BetterHelp can place you with a new one at no additional cost, taking away that stress. I know I have stuck with a therapist that I didn't like in the past just because the idea of finding a new one felt daunting, and I appreciate that that is not an issue with BetterHelp. It's super easy to sign up. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. It is betterhelp.com/summer. That link will save you 10% off of your first month, making it even more affordable. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our layers. Okay, and then so we're just gonna keep continuing rounding with the head. So you'll take your next section, match it up to your previous section. Nothing too huge. You wanna try to take the same amount of sections each time you are like moving through the haircut. And I like to do the fine side of my comb on the bottom. You're gonna come out, let that perimeter fall as always. I see my guide here, cut. I'm doing more of a blunt cut on my mannequin. A lot of times I point cut, but I highlighted her hair to make her a little bit lighter. And I run into this every time I highlight the mannequin's hair, you know, it doesn't really lift as great. So she's a little fragile, so I'm blunt cutting just to keep more weight. But you could easily point cut your client if they have a lot of hair or they like seeing a little bit more texture. So I've got this section to go, and then this will be my last one for our back layers. Nothing to cut there. Take from that previous guide. Last section. Cut. Oh yeah, much better. So what we're gonna do before we start our front layers, I'm gonna come straight across this top. I'm actually gonna respray her down. Just come right across your top, and you're gonna pull this straight up like you would as if you were doing a square layer, because this is gonna check our top layer here, because this is gonna be the guide for blending into that square layer through our front side. So come all the way up. We need to cut a little bit more into this. And then just to make sure that blends through, just a little bit on these two areas. Okay, if you are not familiar with what square layers are, or if you didn't even know that there was a difference between round or square, I highly suggest I'll link it in the description as well. My video where I compare side by side what a round versus square layer looks like. So go ahead and check that out. You can continue watching here, obviously, but if you want more information or to see like even more about round or square layers, check out that video. So what we're going to be doing is, I have had some clients where like they only want face framing, but typically what happens if you only just do the face framing and you don't layer through here at all, you kind of get like this disconnect. You get all the layers in the back, but you don't have enough movement here in the front. So what we're gonna be doing is to do our square layers. If you watch the other video, or you go check it out after this, what I do is everything comes straight up. From the top section down, you're coming everything straight up. So we're gonna be taking that same idea here, but what we're gonna be doing, instead of just coming a dead even straight up and cutting across, I'm gonna be angling up. So you're gonna have your fingers are twisted. your knuckle or whichever, however you hold, will either be up to the ceiling or your fingers will be to the ceiling. And then what you're gonna do to connect these two, you're gonna take your back layer, and this is gonna set the guide for you through the top. So this is why we're gonna be angling, because if you just come in and cut this straight across, you would still have more weight actually down here, but I want it to be a little bit softer. So that's why we're gonna be angling and cutting up into it to keep a little bit more length and weight. So I'm gonna cut this in half first, just because this is a lot of length here. So you could even grab a bigger section if you wanted to be able to make sure you really see that guide. So you're gonna come straight up, and I'm gonna actually angle it a little bit, over direct it forward slightly. So come up, we're angling up. This is sort of how I even do some of my long layers. I see my guide down here, and I'm literally just cutting straight into that with my angle forming. So a lot of my long layers, I angle the same exact way. So we're sort of taking inspiration from that as well as our square layers, because again, these are all gonna be coming straight up. So we're gonna move into our next section. I'm using the fine side of my comb, come straight up. I'm angled still forward, and you're just gonna continue to blend in where your previous guide is and cutting up into that next section. Lightly over directing forward. Come straight up, angle, and cut. So as you'll see, when you let the hair out, it sort of creates this angle going forward. So you get still the layers that'll meet your back layers, but you keep more length and weight around the front. And then when we get done cutting our layers, I'll show you how to blend it in with the face frame. So I'm gonna take my next section, just straight across the head here. So essentially, we did vertical layers in the back, and we're doing horizontal layers in the front. So we're just mixing it all up today. So again, you can cut this section in half because it's a lot of hair, and we're just combing straight up. Everything comes straight up. Remember to over direct slightly here and just blend that in. Next section. I see my guide. Cut. And you're gonna continue doing that all through till you kind of run out of hair. I'm curious how much more I'll be cutting. Her length is fairly long. This might be our last piece. And I am slightly over directing it back to the part. This is like a side, slightly off center part. I'm gonna pull this up. This is a part that's all kind of optional depending on what your client's wanting. Like if you're worried you're gonna be cutting the length here on this last section, let me see. Yeah, there's barely anything. But let's say if you were worried this would be coming up and getting cut too much of the length, you could leave it out and choose to blend it in later. So that's what I'm gonna do to show you guys, what it looks like. That would have barely anything removed, but I'm gonna leave it just so. And then I'm gonna cut the rest of my square layers on the other side first, and then I'll show you how we face frame. So again, we're gonna take our first section here, grab from that back guide. We're gonna be angling forward slightly. Notice I'm now on the opposite side of the head. So my fingers are now pointing up towards the ceiling. Angle all the way up. Go forward a little. I didn't go forward enough. And cut. And go forward. Cut. And then also another thing actually you could do, instead of focusing on that back layer to connect your side, you would just want to actually pull from your previous, the other side of the head here. So you can either take from the back again or take from the side. It's a safer bet to actually take from the side you just finished cutting. So I'm gonna correct that here just to make sure they match. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that old guide. I'll show you. Just a little bit, it doesn't need to be a lot. And then take your new section here. And then that way you can see and make sure you're following through, which you probably need just a little bit more cut off. So I'm glad I caught myself. And we're good. And then we're just gonna move on into our next guide here. You're just doing horizontal sections straight across, pulling the hair all the way back up, and we're over directing slightly back to our part. Twist, twist, twist. Cut. And just continue to follow that guide. Make sure your sections are small enough that you can see through to the guide. If you can't see through to your guide, make your section smaller. And I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna actually leave this perimeter out just to make sure we're not taking away any extra length at our perimeter. Okay, so what we're gonna do now that we have created our layers along her sides, I'm gonna actually spritz her down first and then we're gonna create face framing. Okay, so now that we're back to our parting and she's nicely combed, what we're gonna do is just blend in our face frame. So as you can see, it's still really nice and long around the face, but you can see a little bit of where she's shorter here, but she maintained more length here. So we're just gonna blend that in a little bit without removing too much length. So what we're basically gonna be doing, I'm at her ear part, I'm just gonna be connecting this gap in between here. So it's still gonna be a long face frame well below the chin. You can pull it back, tuck it, but it'll blend in better to this length. So I'm actually, against what I always tell you guys, I'm gonna take this one big section of hair because I can see the length down here that I want to blend into. So I'm gonna hold it fairly flat to where I can see that, and I'm just gonna come in, I'm well below the chin, and we're just gonna sliver right down into that. If you're able to visually see it that easy, you can go ahead and do that. If the client has really thick, dense hair, you wanna do it in sections, but when you're able to more so visually see that, you can blend it in very easily, and then you can kind of visually look at it and see if you need to nip anymore. But so we've got our face frame piece. This client can easily tuck it behind their ear, pull it back into a ponytail, and then I'm gonna do the same on the other side. And then at this point, you would just match it up to what you have here. So you take your section first and just connect those two. So now I've got my guide. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna blend this in from my guide here. So I like standing across the face, and I'm just gonna come cutting up from the bottom. And I wanna make sure that I don't cut my length. I'm just gonna sliver on that and pull towards you if you wanna maintain more length. Okay, so I'm gonna get her blown out, just a nice blow dry, give her some volume and movement, and then we'll see where we need to possibly blend in and maybe take any layers shorter depending on how they fall. And then, yeah, I can't wait to see how this connects. Okay, I just finished drying her and she is beautiful. I love it. So first things first, we have a couple spots we need to do a little bit of dry cutting on, but oh my gosh, I'm sorry, this haircut just came out really nice. I'm glad I thought of it. Not to toot my own horn. So one thing I wanna make note, sometimes with the square layers, you can get a little bit of a weight just because for one, they're stationary, so you're bringing the weight all the way up, so the point of them is to maintain them, but they can sometimes be a little heavy. So what you'd wanna do, whether you wanna use thinning shears or your regular shears, you would just come in and grab along the top layer here, and you're just gonna soften it up. It doesn't need to be a lot, just to blend that in softly and gently. If you had somebody who wanted to make sure that you were leaving as much weight as possible, I would point cut over using the thinning shears, but for mannequin hair, the thinning shears it is. This side didn't look too bulky as the other, but I'm gonna do it just anyways. I mean, she came out beautiful. I'm like loving it. I gotta like do this to myself again when my hair grows out. So just coming lightly along the face and just softening that up. So I left this more of like a medium layer. I didn't wanna take like too much to make it too short, just to kind of keep things different, but even just taking that little bit of texturizing, I mean, made that perfect. So along the back, you can come in, and I'm trying to show, I can only see so much of my little monitor, but what you do when you switch from round to square layers, you see how your back layer meets into your top back section. So they meet really nice, but you get a little bit of an angle that comes forward towards the front, but you maintain all your weight and thickness still. So you have plenty of movement and shape, and doing those square layers to tie into the back really keep it connected and blended, but you don't have as much weight and length removed through the front. I'm really honestly obsessed with this, and her color came out good. I hadn't looked at her color yet. So you could always talk with the client about whether or not they wanted more face framing. I kind of want to take up more, but I think I'm gonna leave it. A good question for you guys in the comments. Would you like to see this face frame brought up more, or do you like the longer look of it? I'm gonna just lightly, I'm not gonna necessarily shorten this, but I wanna cut into the bottom part just a little bit more. So to do that, I'm just gonna come in, bring this down, angle it forward. I mean, it's really not doing anything, but in my mind, it makes me feel better. It's so pretty. I'm gonna get her reshaped and styled, and then we'll get you guys out of here. Here we have our finished and final look. I really love how this one came together. I had so much fun cutting it. We have got lots of movement all in the back from those round layers to create maximum movement with our side and front square layers connecting to those back layers, but flowing so nice into the front to keep more weight and movement. A nice face frame to complete the look, and you will be loving your hair with this haircut. Thank you again to our sponsor, BetterHelp. Be sure to check out the link in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I will see you on the next one.